Today we are going to cover up the module 4, which is project integration management. This is a very critical module when it comes to the preparation from the PMP perspective. And why critical is because if you remember, that's the only group which has a presence in each of the process areas. So this knowledge group has a presence in initiating, executing, planning, monitoring, control, and closing, all 5 process groups. This knowledge area has a presence. And this also, as the name indicates, project integration management. This is the group which helps us to integrate from all other processes. So take a note of the today's objective and agenda. The agenda for today is why manage an integration, develop project charter, develop project management plan, direct and manage project work, monitor and control project work, perform integrated change control, close project or phase, and Q&A. So that's how our today's session is structured. Let us start with the today's agenda, which is very clearly on the integration. So why manage integration? In fact, if you remember, I discussed with you that the first area among the various other processes, which is the planning area, for example, plan communication management, the output is communication management plan. Plan risk management, the output is risk management plan. So most of the processes which are falling afterwards after the integration, the plan pertaining to those respective processes, the plan is being fed as an input to the project integration area. And that is where we talk about the integration. And those plans, what I am actually giving an example of, for example, a risk management plan or a procurement plan or a communication management plan, these are the plans which are known as subsidiary project management plans. You remember there are 10 knowledge groups. The first one is the integration, and the remaining 9, whatever management plans they produce, those management plans are called as subsidiary plan, and that's the plan we are talking about here. So all those plans have to be integrated, they have to be merged to form a process management plan. So that is where the develop project management plan actually covers up. So basically, why integrate? Integrate is to ensure we combine, we unify, and we coordinate various processes and the project management stuff. This is from the perspective of adding up and looking at the changes or maybe the effect which each of these management plan can have on the overall project integration. So basically this consists of the processes on which project manager depends on to ensure the integration of all the projects is done well. And if the integration is done well, I'm sure the project is done well from that side. Why the name subsidiary project management came into the picture is that if we look back, the areas other than project integration, every knowledge group produces an output of the respective area, and that is called as the management plan. As I gave you the example of the risk management plan, the communication management plan, and stuff like this. Why it is subsidiary is because that's a plan without which the integration, the main integration is not complete, and that is where we call that as a subsidiary management plan. And there is another reason that we wanted to give a name to it, and the reason is going forward, in each of those chapters, because the subsidiary management plan could be an input or could be an output to various processes from here. So instead of naming up 9 management plans separately, instead of naming the output from those knowledge areas separately, there is a name given to it, which is very clearly a subsidiary project management plan. So once we use this word in any of the other slides from now, by default, what you need to understand is that this is the output from the processes listed from the process project scope management till the project stakeholder management. So that's the purpose of assigning a name to it. All right, Jasudas. Let me move ahead. One point which you need to note in each of the process now is that you need to look at what are the inputs we are feeding into this process. What are the tools and techniques we are using it in this process? And what's the output we are producing? So what we will do is, the way the program is structured from here is that we would understand what are those inputs, we would understand what are the tools and techniques, and we would know what is the output of respective processes producing it. And that's how the total book is structured. So we are going to start with the first process in project integration management knowledge area. And the first process belongs to initiating process group. This is develop project charter. And since it's a beginning of the project as such, so there are not many things available in hand as an input. And the input available for the purpose of the develop project charter is the project statement of work. And that's the statement which is very clearly understood that once the sponsor is actually putting a proposal, he would mention that what is the job we are supposed to deliver on by the way of the project. And this is what is in short called as the statement of work. At places it would be also called with a short form called SOW. The next thing comes as that the business case. So what is this business case means? Business case means a justification from the business perspective that why we are executing this project. And if we are executing this project, for sure there is a purpose behind it, and that purpose is justified in a business case with the output it is going to produce, and it would also mention on the benefits which it is going to produce. And this output or a benefit, what we are going to talk about, that output or a benefit would be a justification of that business case. When we start the project, the first document, what becomes the basis is the document called project charter. And in the forthcoming slides, what we will do is we will take up each of these terms separately, and we should give you the more details on the inputs, tools and techniques in detail. And then we would come back again on the slide 7 to know that are we clear on each of those respective inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. So let me take you through the slide 8, discuss on each of those input areas, then tools and techniques, then output, and then come back on this slide again saying where are we. Yeah, so that's how we would proceed from here. So all projects, they start with project charter. So that means project charter becomes a formal document which very clearly defines the authority, and this is the document which very clearly creates the need of the project as such. And remember one main thing, in a lot of scenarios, the project manager also sits with the project sponsor or a steering committee or a PMO when they are writing the project charters. So a recommendation from the PMP perspective is that it is always good that a project manager is involved from the project charter stage itself. That's a recommendation. However, it is not a mandate. There are times when the project sponsor, the PMO, or the portfolio steering committee, they can decide on the charter and they can bring back the project manager after the charter is created. But the ideal way for doing this is that it is better to involve the project manager in writing the project charter so that he is very clear on what to deliver. And remember, this is the first thing that is done in any of the new project. So two things what you should remember. The project charter formally authorizes the existence of project by the sponsor or by the PMO or by the portfolio steering committee. That is one. The second is the charter authorizes the project manager to apply organization resources to the project activities. You got it? So once the charter is available, then only the project manager is authorized to pick up the resources in the organization and talk about it. So basically, who's the sponsor? The person who pays for the project. Correct? We discussed that. Great to know. There's a feedback coming in on the stuff saying in one organization, project sponsor approves it. Yes, that's the way the project generally goes. But you remember, organization influences. So it's all depending on how the organization is structured. The another question is, why is the PMO name coming into the picture to approve the project charter? There are organizations in which there is a centralized body, which is the PMO. They have been given the task of starting up with the new project because that's a formal governance available in an organization to deal with the projects. So in all those cases, they make the project management organization, project management office as the sponsor. So that's depending on the different organization styles. So it is not a mandate that only sponsor can actually give you the project charter. This is all depending on the organization, and that's how the multiple names are used for the purpose of giving you the details. So very clearly, two things to remember. Charter formally authorizes the existence of project, and charter also authorizes the project manager to apply organizational resources to the project activities. So what are the requirements we have when we want to create a project charter? Or if I need to put up this question in another way, why is the need of a project? This is what is the question which is answered in this slide. Why is that we need a project? The purpose why you need a project, it could be a market demand. Maybe the competitors have introduced a kind of a product and your organization is missing on. So there is a market demand. Or it's a new product coming in and everybody wants to start up with this project to come up with a new product. It could be a technological advancement. Maybe you already have a software package with you, but you know that the various other softwares which the software should be compatible of, they are moving on to the next version. So it is actually in your interest to keep ahead with the technology and go forward to ensure there is a development which is taken care of, which is maybe in the form of the project. The next thing comes is a business need. The fourth comes is a legal requirement. It could be a compliance by the government saying, hey, starting April 1st, starting May 1st, you have to be compliant on the taxation and the rules and stuff. So that creates a need for the organization to customize their respective product or software or stuff to be in line with the regulations what has been set up. It could be a social need. It could be a customer request that he wanted to create a project. So these are the different areas which would be focusing or which would be pushing the need of the project. And these needs what are going to be mentioned here, they have to be used by the project manager or the sponsor to be used as the business case. So once you know why that project is created, you can actually build up the business case around that theory. Got it? So going forward, if we have to look back on a customer request, uh, let me share with you one small example for the need because of a customer request. So there is a customer who is pretty much willing to take a step forward, and step forward in terms of creating a difference between what his organization delivers versus the other organization delivers. The example I'm giving it from a construction industry now. So there are various builders who are bringing up the buildings and the apartments. But one builder is very clear. Then he says, I wanted to use the green technology. I wanted to have the natural air coming into my the buildings. And he would also like to apply for the green certification going forward so that he differentiates and distinguishes his set of work from the other builders. So this builder is actually a customer for you. So it's a customer request which is coming into you saying, hey gentlemen, I need such and such requirements and please deliver a project for me. And maybe that's a first building which he wants to produce, which is maybe a green compatible building having use of more of the natural light, and also creating an example of the power usage being the least. So that's an example from the customer request perspective. And the social need kind of project would be very much needed from the social infrastructures perspective. For example, if there is a need to build up some homes for the people who are staying in on the roads, for the on-street guys, so that's a social need that we need to create something for them. That is one. And the another social need also could be, if there is a scarcity of a particular resource in an area, so it becomes a social justification or a social requirement for us to create a facility for them. And a very clear-cut example on a social need can be taken up, that if we are going to create some basic infrastructure for a social sector, that would be the example of the social need, a project because of a social need. The social need project would have a justification very clearly that once we are able to deliver the output, it is justifying back to the society for the particular activity what has been delivered back. So next thing for us to know is that look at the inputs what are needed. Let us look at the inputs what are needed for the project charter. We talked about scope of work, and scope of work is now given a little breakup so that we know. So basically what a scope of work is, that it's a description, narrative description of the products or the services to be delivered by the project. And the scope of work should include the product scope description. The word you need to pay an attention, the word written is product scope description. So don't get confused with project. Then on the left hand side, you look at very clearly, we must know what the business needs are. And of course, what are the strategic plans? So these should be part of the scope of work. That was the first input to the developed project charter. Look at what business case. Business case very clearly defines why the project is worthy of the organization money. It's a document which justifies the need of that project. This is a document which talks about the cost benefit analysis. It gives an indication that why are we into that project, what we need to invest, what are the benefits we are going to gain out of it. So this is which is part of the business case. The next thing comes as a contract. Contracts is something which is, I would say, a guideline. Not necessarily you will have the contracts available at every organization in advance. So the major item which is a basis for the project charter is the scope of work, is the business case, and if at all there is an availability, it would be the contract. And you know very clearly that the business case, you have to pick up the leads from the need by the market, the need by the organization, the customer request, the technological advancement. It could be a legal requirement, it could be an ecological impact, it could be a social need. So how do we measure the benefits coming out of a project? So we'll be using some new terms here, and let me familiarize you with those terms. There are certain methods which are used to know whether a particular project would be beneficial or it would not be beneficial. The first thing which comes on to this radar is known as a murder board. The second thing is known as a peer review. Third, scoring models. Fourth, there are certain cash flow analysis techniques known as payback period, net present value, which is NPV. The third comes the IRR. IRR means the internal rate of return. The fourth comes ROI, that means return on investment. And there are a lot of mathematical models, which could be a linear, dynamic, graphical, to look at whether the project is really beneficial or not. So let us look back on each of those items in detail. And before I do that, let me just answer the question by Narasingha. Doesn't the SOW cover the contract? It may or may not cover the contract, but there are times when there is a request coming in from a customer. The customer generally releases a document which is actually a contract document. Yeah. And one more direct correlation of a contract could be that your organization was bidding for a particular a business with, say, government, and you were successful in getting that bidding from the government. So what government would have given it to you is they would have given it to you maybe a kind of a contract, maybe a kind of a purchase order, maybe a kind of a memorandum of understanding, or maybe a letter of intent. So this is what we meant by the contract word here. So if you have been able to win a bid, very clearly government would have given you a document, which would be a document for you to start the activities. So this is what a contract would in detail means. And it may or may not be the part of SOW, but there are chances if this document is created, it would be a separate document. So let us look back on the words what we mentioned on the previous slide, starting from the benefit measurements method. The first is the payback period. The payback period very clearly is a period which indicates that how fast, in how much time the invested money would be paying you back very clearly. So that means in how many years, in how many months, in how many days your money would start paying you back. So this is what is called as a payback period. So if I break this word into three pieces, first is the pay, second is the back, third is the period. That will give you an easy understanding now. That means a period in which my project is going to pay back is the period which is called as a payback period. The second thing here is that NPV, which is the net present value. Net present value, if I have to explain you in a very simple understanding, is that what is the net present value of a project? You can correlate that with maybe if you have a sum of say about 100,000, and you know that this $100,000 what you have in your bank account, you are getting an interest rate of about 10% an year. So if you need to look at the net present value at the end of the second year or at the beginning of the third year, so you can very clearly identify this value by taking that interest amount in your consideration, adding up that value on the basic value itself, and arrive at a final present value at that point in time. And if I have to make this example much more similar, I would say $100,000 at the interest rate of 10%. The net present value of this $100,000 at the 10% would be 100,000 plus 10% of it, which is about $10,000. So 100,000 plus 10,000 will become your net present value at the end of the first year. So that's how is the net present value being talked about. The third comes is called as an internal rate of return, which is also called as a discount rate at various places. And what that means is that what is the percentage return the project is giving it to us. So that's a return which is going to be available from a project. So once I have maybe 2 or 3 projects in my hand and I need to pick and choose which project would be much beneficial from me from the organization perspective. So this is where we make use of the respective benefit measurements method. And the fourth comes as that ROI. ROI, I'm sure you would know, it is return on investment. So that means once I put back the money into the business, by what time my capital would start yielding the profits. So that means if you have invested $100,000 in a particular project, you are just trying to look at when is that my cost would be covered and when is that I would actually start earning a pure profit out of the money what I have invested in. So these are 4 methods which are used to identify and differentiate that which are the projects one should go for. And why we are actually talking about this with you is that once you are in the beginning of your project, the management must know when is this project going to give you the yield, the payback. And if the management has an option of choosing between the projects, they would prefer to choose a project with a better payout, with an early payout, with a project which is giving an ROI at a much faster pace. So it becomes a kind of easy decision by the management once they know of all the four figures from here. Are we clear? No? Okay. Let me explain maybe these terms quickly for all of you. The payback period means the time in which the amount would start coming back to us, in what time the project would start paying in. So that's a payback period. NPV very clearly we have mentioned, and this is known as the net present value. NPV stands for net present value. FV stands for a future value. So when we are talking about a net present value, we are very clear. We are looking at the money value at a particular time. A money value at the end of 5th year, a money value at the end of 3rd year, a money value at the end of the 1st year. So this is what we are talking about, the money value of that particular project. The third comes is that IRR, which is an internal rate of return or a discount rate. So that means what percentage of returns are going to be received as an output out of the project. And from the exam perspective, you must know that a project which is giving more internal rate of return is the project what has to be preferred from the perspective of selection of the project. If you have been given a chance by the management saying these are the 3 projects, so give us the kind of the benefits measurement study. So you guys will have to look at which is the project which is having a faster and the better internal rate of return, IRR. You need to choose that project. You need to also look at which is the project which is going to give you a faster return on investment. So these are the projects which you'll have to choose over the other projects. So the main use of these terms is very clearly in choosing what should be the preferred projects. Are we clear? The questions pertaining to this area in the exam would be very clearly the questions wherein you would be given some figures. For example, you would be given a figure saying a project with a XYZ company, project A is going to give you a yield of 5%. Project A is going to give you an IRR of 5%. Project B is going to give you a IRR of 7%. Which is the project you will choose? So the higher the IRR, that is where you need to prefer back. So your answer would be a project with the higher IRR. That means between 5 and 7%. If the project B has 7% IRR, that's the project to be selected. The terms ROI and the terms payback, they are very closely related. The payback very clearly means that the time it takes to recover the amount invested, which is generally in various years. And ROI very clearly means that this is actually a ratio of the profits related with your the money invested. So the difference between these two point is that payback is generally going in multiple years, whereas when we talk about a return on investment, so that means if I have invested in say about $100,000 and by the 5th or 6th money, I start that the project has started giving some output. So that is where we will talk about and return on investment. Or if I have to correlate this example with a building which you constructed, and when that building start giving you the rental, so that is where maybe you can say that the building has started giving you some output. So that is what is an ROI. Return on investment has actually started coming in. Payback period is for a longer duration. However, ROI means whenever you start getting the output from it and this output is very clearly because of the money you have invested in. Okay. So with this, let me take you through some more terms now. The next term what I'm going to talk about is a term called opportunity cost. And if I have to explain you on the what the opportunity cost is, it's a very simple word. The opportunity lost is an opportunity cost. So that means if you have two projects in your hand, one project is carrying a value of about $50,000. The second project carries a value of $200,000. If you have selected the project, which is a project with a $50,000, then whatever you have not selected, that means the opportunity which you have not selected becomes the opportunity cost. So in that case, your answer would be that opportunity cost is $200,000. That means you have not selected that project, so that becomes your opportunity cost. In simple words, the project which the value of a project which you have not selected is the value which is known as the opportunity cost. Whatever you have selected, anyway, you are going ahead with that project. So whatever you could not or whatever you had missed out is something called as an opportunity cost. Now there are going to be terms which would be used in and out in our next chapters. And the first term is that work performance data. And the terms which we'll be using is that there would be three terms which we'll be using, which would resemble with each other when it comes to a name, but they would carry a different meaning. The first term is work performance data. The second term would be a work performance information. Third term would be a work performance report. So you must know about all these three different terms. Yes, Anup, the opportunity what you have lost is the opportunity. What is the opportunity cost? Okay. Are we guys clear till here? Because I see some more questions coming in. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on. And the terms which I'm going to share with you now is three terms: work performance data, work performance information, and work performance report. Going forward, this would be used pretty often, so you must know what those terms are. So what do you mean by a work performance data? Very clearly, work performance data means a raw observation. Raw means a kind of a tentative observation picked up from the project. Example is you have some start date and a finish date. You have how many the change requests you have received, how many defects you have till maybe in a particular process. What is the actual cost? What is the actual duration? This is what is called as a raw observation. So the word raw observation is attached with work performance data. Second thing is work performance information. And work performance information means the performance related data which has been collected from various sources in the project. It could be a forecast. Once we generate a forecast out of a process, if a cost forecast is generated, or if a forecast is generated that what is the amount which we would be using to complete the project, that means a forecast estimate to complete the project. Such information is actually going to be known as work performance information, which is actually a kind of an information collected by certain process outputs in the system. For example, you would have also seen the schedule. You would know that the amount which you have already consumed or used when it comes to the money which was allocated for the project, and basis which you are telling that what more money is needed for that project. It could be a status of the change request, that what is the status of those change requests, and you would pick up the information again from the various controlling sources. You will look at, maybe you will go to a change management process and see how many change requests have come in and what is the status. The third comes, which is called as a work performance report. So work performance report is very clearly, it is either a physical representation or an electronic representation on various reports. And it could be a report coming out from the project itself. Very clearly, it would be, it can be an information note, it can be a status report, it can be a dashboard talking about the various information on the project. And this is something which is actually becoming a kind of a major document once we reach to maybe towards the end of the process. But in the beginning, what you would notice is that once we are in the initial processes, you would see that we would be using work performance information or work performance data pretty often. So once we use those terms, you should be very clear that what do we meant by the information, work performance information, work performance report, work performance data. The one easy thing for you to remember is when we talk about a work performance data, please remember the word raw observation. When we talk about a work performance report, remember a word called physical or an electronic representation. So these would be the words which would help you to differentiate between these terms. Let me discuss on two more inputs which were there for the project charter, and those inputs were enterprise environmental factors. What is meant by the enterprise environment factors was the factors which can influence the activity of a developed project charter are the factors from the environmental perspective. If you remember why there is a need to create a project, you discussed, it could be a social need, it could be a technological advancement, it could be a customer request, it could be a legal requirement coming in. So since we are working in an environment which is pretty much can change depending on the organization needs, the country needs, maybe the society needs. So we need to pay attention to those of the activities. It could be a government standard which is changing in. It could be an industry standard or a regulation which is changing in. So we have to keep ourselves updated on those parameters, and that's the reason that the environmental factors are actually used as an input to this process. And the second one is the organization process assets. You have already read the definition of organization process asset in the previous modules. And this means that the processes what an organization follows, the rules, the policies, the guidelines, the process, the authority, various templates what an organization expects you to use. Those templates could be pertaining to a project charter. Those templates could be pertaining to the various processes. And with the help of the organizational process asset, you would also know that what are the lessons learned, and maybe if there are any historical information available on that project. Remember these two activities, these two inputs, which is enterprise environment factors. In short, it is called as an EEF. And the next one, which is organization process asset, in short, it would also be called as an OPA. These two would be the inputs to majority of the processes going forward. So it would become a very common input to any of the processes once we go forward. And once I take you through on the various processes, you would find out that these names are the most frequent names appearing as an input to all of the processes. So are we clear till here? Let me take you back in some of the other terms which are known as something called as a murder board. So what do you understand by a murder board? A murder board means Sanjeev, not exactly it is the brainstorming, it is not exactly, but a kind of motherboard would clearly mean that there are people who are the experts who are sitting in, and a team which tries to put back a question on the business case, what has been developed for a project, the objectives, what you have mentioned in the project. So all kind of questions are related and asked to the project objectives to see that will it survive? If we deliver XYZ objective, will it work? So the name motherboard is given from a perspective that you try to justify the objectives of that project and also try to talk on the various concerns or various issues that could be a hurdle while the objectives are going to be talked about. And this is a way to very clearly eliminate the project which is not good enough. If I carry maybe about 3 projects in hand, so the team, with the help of the motherboard, by putting up various questions that why is that need and why it could not survive and stuff, they would try to analyze the objectives from all means, and that is where they would be able to freeze and finalize, saying the project 1 we cannot go ahead because of XYZ reasons, project 2 we cannot go ahead because of XYZ reasons, a project 3 gets selected. So that is where the motherboard comes into the play. It's a term which is used in some of the organizations, so you must be familiar with that term. The second is called as a peer review. Peer review is very clearly that you will give this project for a review by your peers and you will try to know of their comments, what are their comments. Scoring model is very clearly that you put up a score for all of the projects and you want to look at which is the project giving you the best of the scores, very easy. So this is what we meant by the motherboard, peer review and the scoring models. Let me move on to now the next item, and before I do that, let me take back some of your questions. Narsinga, your question is not clear. If you can actually type in again, I'm not able to know the context which you want to ask, because if I am able to correlate your short forms, WPD means work performance data. Is that right? So these 3 terms pertaining to the work performance data, work performance information, work performance report would be pretty often used in most of the process groups. And if I'm able to understand Narsinga correctly, that once we are towards the end of the closer phase of the process groups, the terminology which is work performance report is used pretty much. Absolutely, absolutely, got it right. In fact, I was just trying to read out those short forms. Now I got it. Yes, you're right. Tushar, you are asking that is the motherboard can be compared with the risk analysis? It cannot be truly correlated with the risk analysis, but enough questions are being asked, enough purviews are being taken from all the perspectives, including the risk, what this project might carry. So risk would be a small subset to the overall activities in the motherboard. It would be a small subset. The next question is that the peer review. Peer review is something This is done at the initial stages on the benefit analysis stage in the beginning, when we are trying to see that whether the project is going to yield some good maybe output and good revenue and stuff. And this is where once we are talking about a peer review, very clearly means that we might have some subject matter expert or some senior members in the organization at that stage. And this could be maybe a team from PMO or a project sponsor or project manager and other members who would try to understand. And this is what a peer review would mean. Peer review is a review is not a document. It is, I would say, more or less mindset of the peers basis the experience what they carry, and it would be an expert comment. Maybe that's an easy thing to correlate. You can consider that as an expert comment by the peers. Okay, so with this we would move next. So what is the template for a project charter? So there are two ways for us to actually go ahead to know what could be a template. The first easy way is that look at the organization process asset. The organization process asset would very clearly give you an indication of is there any template existing with the organization. So that very clearly becomes your easy thing to pick up. But in case that organization is not having a project charter template, what you should be doing is that you should know of the various points which are mentioned on this slide, and these are the points which ideally should be part of the project charter in case there is no template available. It can be as simple as an Microsoft Excel worksheet carrying these headings in an Excel file. There is no predefined template or stuff what we have when it comes to a template, but there are fields which we emphasize on when we talk about a template. And what those fields are: number one, the charter must talk about what's the project description, what are the objectives, the objectives should be very clearly giving you a message on the triple constraint. And if you remember, that triple constraint is that the concern of a project is basically onto the scope, the time, the cost. These are the three major items when it comes for a triple constraint. So objectives must be very clearly defined, which should also touch base on the triple constraint. The third thing a project charter must contain is a project scope overview. That means what is there in the scope. Also very clearly defining what is not in the scope and what would be kind of little uncertainties in the scope. The fourth item comes as the major deliverables. We must know that what is going to be my major output, what is going to be my major deliverable, and at what time. And we must also know that what are the major milestones for us. Milestones, I think somebody asked it yesterday. The milestone means various dates wherein we try to put back a task saying the task XYZ should be completed by so and so time frame. So that time frame becomes, that date becomes the milestone for us to check whether we are in line with that milestone achievement or not. Business case we have already discussed, and it should very clearly justify, it should very clearly communicate why is the project being done. Financial benefits is, of course, I would say the top thing for a project charter. You must know that once you execute this project, what are going to be the financial benefits? And the last two things which are very much needed is that it should be signed and approved by the respective management. And once the project charter is signed, it becomes the official document for us to refer back. And project charter must clearly define that who is going to be the project manager leading the project. So go through the charter contents once again. This is going to be an important area for you. And remember, initiating process group areas, if you look at, there are only two initiating process group areas. One falls under project integration management, which is develop project charter. The second falls under project stakeholder management, which is identify stakeholders. And you will be very clearly asked questions pertaining to the initiating process areas, and project charter would become the default first choice when it comes from an exam perspective. So you must know which stage the project charter is signed, what all it contains, and what are the rights or an authority to a project manager once the charter is signed. So I repeat, a charter must contain project description, project objectives, project scope overview, major deliverables, milestones, business case, financial benefits, details of the signing authority and approving authority, and the assigned project manager. From a software project perspective, if I have to correlate back with the various important dates, I would be very clearly talking about the date of the system testing, the date of the internal testing, the date of user acceptance testing, various dates by which the respective modules would be up. These are the various dates what we are talking, maybe from a milestone perspective of a software project. And if I correlate the similar milestone from a construction background, I would correlate back with maybe the foundation, maybe the flooring, maybe the various levels what we need to frame up in a building. So this is how we would talk about the various milestone in different kind of industries and the project. So are we clear till here, guys? Thanks. And you need to keep confirming back on your understanding, because starting from this chapter is little big chapter, and we would try to really see that if we can cover up the total chapter maybe today, because I wanted to ensure that a thorough understanding is available to all of you, and I would not prefer to rush to maybe finish this chapter without you guys getting to get an understanding. And this also is a basis of the next chapters itself. So if you guys are clear on this chapter, then it would be a very thorough understanding you would receive it. Thanks for confirmation, and let me move forward. So we have covered up the first process, which is develop project charter, and let me take you back as I committed to look back. Now you know the project statement of work, you know the business case. I have also shared with you on the agreements. And the tools and techniques, what we are going to use is that expert judgment. We talked about various peer reviews and stuff to be talked about, talking to the various people, getting to know. We also talked about the discussions, what we are going to do. And this is what would be resulting in a project charter as an output. Now we are clear on this. Let me move back on the second process, which is develop project management plan. And one key point now you guys should start taking a note of: the output from the previous process is actually being fed as an input to this process. The output of the previous process was project charter. Now you need to know and correlate of the understanding what I was sharing with you yesterday, saying a developed project charter results into a project charter. So the output of a developed project charter was project charter. And when we have to develop a project management plan, remember we have not completed many of the other activities. And if I see it from the process group perspective, we are now moving on to a second stage. The develop project charter was the stage one, which was the initiating process phase. In initiating, that was the first thing. Now, once we are on to the develop project management plan, we are on to the planning portion of our project, because the develop project management plan is part of the planning process group. And what are the inputs available for us till this stage? The first input, which is a project charter, which is basically an output of the previous process. The third and fourth input, I told you that the enterprise environment factors, which is EEF, and the second is an organizational process asset, OPA. These two items would continue to be the inputs to most of the processes going forward. So this is there by default. And the second input is something what you pay attention to is known as output from other processes. So what is that we meant by the output from other processes? I would cover up shortly for you. The tools and techniques, they remain the same, saying you have the expert judgment and you have facilitation techniques. What would be the output? Very easy to correlate: project management plan. Remember, I was talking to you on the other 9 processes, the knowledge areas as well, very clearly telling you that a project communication plan management results into an output of communication management plan. Similarly, develop project management plan results into an output of project management plan. And why I am giving an emphasis on the various inputs and outputs is actually to give you a fair understanding, so that once you know various inputs and outputs, it will be easy for you to correlate why that process is needed and what is that process is all about. And you may be given some questions very clearly to know that whether you know of various inputs and outputs of the different processes. So the way I would like to propose is that we need to understand the various inputs and outputs rather than cramming it. I would avoid cramming those things, because cramming would not stay in your mind for long. But the PMP is one such exam which you can clear only if you have absorbed various concepts and you have got a good understanding of the topics. Cramming would not yield into a positive outcome for you very clearly. So I would avoid to the extent possible. Please do not cram. Please try to understand wherever you can. So very clear, we are into the develop project management plan, which is the part of planning process group. We have taken the output from the previous process, which is project charter, as an input. We have taken EEF, we have taken OPA, we have tools and techniques as expert judgment, facilitation technique, and output is going to be project management plan. So what are the project management plan? The project management plan very clearly defines how we are going to execute this project. It also defines how the project is executed, monitored, and controlled. And this is going to be a plan which will be helping us to manage, coordinate, and integrate at different knowledge areas and processes within the project. So the process of creating the project management plan, what are the other plans that we are going to talk about? You remember in the input section, there was something called as an output from other processes. So this is what I am explaining this to you on slide number 19. The output from other processes means, let me start with the project scope management first. The first is the scope management plan. That is the output from the fifth knowledge area, after fifth module, which is the second knowledge area. The scope management plan would be one of the outputs. Requirements management plan would be the second output from the scope process. Then comes your schedule management plan, which will be an output of your project time management process. The output from project cost management process is going to be a cost management plan. Then similarly, the quality management plan, the process improvement plan, human resource plan, the communication management plan, risk management plan, procurement management plan, change management plan, configuration management plan, staffing management plan, risk response plan, milestone list, resource calendar, cost baseline, quality baseline, scope baseline, risk register, various logs, change logs. Let me explain these terms one by one now. Let me start with the scope management plan. The scope management plan defines how a scope is going to be planned, managed, and monitored across the project. A requirements management plan very clearly indicates how are going to be the project requirements defined, how would you gather those requirements, and how would you manage those requirements very clearly. So for you to understand this management plan, remember what each of this plan is going to be doing is that dealing with the respective area planning, how that area can be planned, managed, and controlled. These are going to be the three keywords for you to know what is going to be meant by the respective management plan. Cost management plan means how the cost is going to be planned, estimated, budgeted, monitored, controlled. Quality management plan will tell you how do you want to plan for the quality, how do you want to actually see various quality assurance coming into the play, and what is going to be the control measures for you from the quality perspective. And this would also result into a process improvement plan. If you look at from a quality process, and if the process is not resulting into the quality what has been benchmarked or the standards what have been defined in the beginning, a process improvement plan comes into the play for the improvement on the quality as such. Human resource plan very clearly helps us to define how are we going to bring in the project members into the project. How would you take care? How will we take care of their training needs, their roles and responsibilities, their roles and rewards and recognition? Communication would very clearly define in how the communication is going to be done in the various with the various stakeholders. Risk management plan will very clearly helps us to identify and manage the various risks. Procurement management plan will help us to control the procurement. Change management plan would help us to bring in a change once the changes are initiated and approved by the change control board. We would follow the change management plan. Configuration management plan is a kind of a part of our input to the control scope process. It very clearly defines on how to change various features and functions to suit the final output. Staffing management plan gives us an indication of how we are going to be meeting the staffing requirements. In case we need to negotiate with an outside supplier on the manpower, or we should be able to manage it within the team and stuff. So this is all what is being taken up as an input from the perspective of the develop project management plan. Risk response plan is very clearly a strategy to deal with various risks which are identified. Milestone, we already covered that. What are the different milestones we are going to set? Resource calendar is a kind of calendar of the people who are going to be working in the project. And resource calendar would also mean that it's a human resource calendar or a timings availability. You need to consider in your mind that the people who are working into the project, those people may be located at one single place, maybe in one organization, maybe in one office. They could be working in from different geographies. They could be working in different countries altogether. So from that perspective, you must know the availability of each of the resources, and you also know by the regions that since it is going to be multiple regions or multiple cities, there would be some kind of non-availability of the respective people, either because of their own schedule or because of maybe various cultural festival, or maybe a government holidays and stuff. You need to keep all those activities in the mind. And three main items, which are cost baseline, quality baseline, and a scope baseline. These are the three items which are again the input back to the develop project management plan. Remember, we discussed on these three plans yesterday with a message very clearly that once these plans are approved, the cost baseline, the quality baseline, and the scope baseline, any changes to these three baselines after they are freezed can only be done by the change request management process. That means we need to bring back the issue to the change control board, which is CCB, and then only those changes can happen. Next term comes as a risk register. Risk register is nothing but a sheet of paper which would help us to document what are going to be the different risks, and this is also called as a database of all the possible risks what you can encounter, and those risks are actually taken care of in a risk response plan, wherein you will define a strategy to deal with that kind of risk. Then comes an issue log. All the issues are identified and there is a numbering system, so there is a log which is maintained. And there is an assumption log also, like once you execute a project, you take various assumptions into the play. So even those assumptions are documented. Then comes the change log. All the changes which we are entering into a project, there is a change log which gets created. And these are also pretty much related with your change management plan as such. So this is what is various, maybe the indication for us for the various terms, which would be used in and out once we talk about on the processes as such. So you need to remember those terms very clearly from the perspective of the terms getting used again. Yeah. Let me move forward. Now we are reaching to the third process of project integration management. And this third process is called as direct and manage project work. So till now we have completed develop project charter, we have completed develop project management plan, and now we are on to a third topic. Before we do that, let me take up the questions, whatever you may have till here. The question which comes up is that, do we need to have schedule baseline in a subsidiary plan? Which should be the performance baseline? There are three baselines from the perspective of the exam, and these baselines are the scope baseline, the schedule baseline, the cost baseline. These are the outputs of various processes. For example, when we are actually going to deal with a project cost management knowledge area, so in one of the processes, you will be getting an output as a cost baseline. Likewise, the process in the project scope management and process in the project schedule management will give you the other baselines. These baselines would serve as an input to the project management plan, because your overall project management plan should very clearly know that what is going to be the cost, what is going to be the time, budget, money, milestones, and stuff available at any point of time. A WBS dictionary, a WBS means a work breakdown structure. Once we get into the chapter project scope management, we would be discussing in detail on how to create a work breakdown structure, which is how to create a WBS. From the current chapter's perspective, you can understand thus that a WBS is very similar to an organization hierarchy, with all of the activities broken down in a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. This is called as a WBS, and the moment a word dictionary attached to it, which is WBS dictionary, that would mean that each of those activities are documented with their attributes, with their features, and a description and detailing of those WBS activities. That is what is called as a WBS dictionary. So in the next chapter, which is project scope management, we would be creating the WBS, and I would be demonstrating you how to create a WBS. From the current chapter understanding, I'm sure you would have got a good understanding on what the WBS and the WBS dictionary means. All right, Tushar? So I will move forward now, which is with the next process in hand, which is direct and manage project work. Again, remember the tip which I shared with you, saying before you start looking into the inputs, remember what is the output of the previous process. And these outputs will have to consider from two perspectives. The one is that which process group you are in. The second, which knowledge area you are in. So the output of the previous process to us was project management plan, which is actually now serving as an input to direct and manage project work. The third and fourth input, which is enterprise environmental factors, EEF. The fourth, which is organization process asset, remains. And the another input which has been added here is an approved change request. And why approved change request is that because once you know of various subsidiary plans, once you know of the output from various other processes, what we discussed some time back on the various terms, once you know of those outputs, I'm sure since you would try to integrate all those plans back at one place, So there would for sure be a need of certain changes, and that is where those approved change requests would come into the play. When it comes to the tools and techniques, the expert judgment remains the same. The second which is getting added is project management information system. And this is something what we discussed in the last class, saying MS Office, the MS project kind of a software is also called as a project management information system. That means a tool or a utility for you to maybe automate certain thing, maybe to punch various tasks in a software. And it could be a tool like a Primavera, which is basically used for the construction industry. But the majority of the people, I have seen them using the MS project as a tool for project management information system. Third happens to be the meetings, which is a kind of a pretty easy tool to look at. Now, let us look back on the outputs, what this process delivers. So the output, what this process delivers is the deliverables, the work performance, the output. And if you look at the item number 3, item number 4, item number 5, we are very clearly able to see that this results into a project management plan updates. And why project management plan updates? Because the input what you have fed was the various management plan from the processes, and the output what you are getting in is actually a project management plan update, which very clearly gives you an indication of that some changes have been done to the overall plan as such. So now let us discuss these items maybe in the detail. You have also known and studied the 3 major items, and those 3 major items were work performance information, work performance data, work performance report. And we very clearly agreed that once we talk about a work performance data, we should relate back with the raw observation. So the output which is getting produced as a part of this process is work performance data. Got it? Let me look at some of these terms in little detail. So you must know what is that process going to work, what is the activity which is going to be covered in that process, and this activity is that it is this process which is direct and managed project work. It is a process of performing the work defined in the project management plan to achieve the project objectives. And the activities what should be included as a part of this direct and managed project work is perform activities to accomplish project requirements, create project deliverables, staff, train and manage them, follow the HR plan to actually obtain the resources, manage them. And the resources here are resources which is just not human resource, but other resources as well, which includes the material, the tools, the equipments, the facility. Implement the planned methods. And why implement the planned method is that you have already covered up the planning. Have you? Yes. And one main item what you guys must know in your mind is that this process is actually part of the executing process group. You remember we talked on initiating, planning, executing. So we are into the third process group when we are executing this process. The knowledge management area what we represent is project integration management, and we are into the third process of this knowledge management area, and we are into the executing. This process is actually followed in an executing stage. So this is part of executing process group, and that is where we are writing back saying implement the planned methods and standards. Why? Because you are already through from your planning exercise. Then comes establish and manage project communication channels, both internal and external to the project. Generate the information which is project data, such as cost, schedule, technical, quality progress. Issue various change requests, because execution is the process which deals with such change requests. Manage various risk and implement the risk response activities. And why implement those strategies? That because that's the stage by the time you would know that whether you had really faced those challenges or the risk what you identified in the beginning. And that's a stage to manage the sellers, the suppliers. And another activity which is going to be part of this is that we need to also start and collecting the lesson learned. So this is what which should be there as a part of the direct and manage project work. So once you get to know of the activities like this, you should very clearly correlate in your mind that you are in an executive process group, and the process group what you are representing is in direct and manage project work. So directing and managing the project also needs the project management team to respond back to various situations and conditions in the project. A new condition or a new situation warrants the project management team very clearly planning and then looking into the confronting with the problem. And this is where some of the previous lines were talking about, that you would prefer to take various risk response strategy as a part of this stuff. The below three activities coincides with executing the project plan. 1. Apply corrective actions to ensure that the remaining performance of the projects comes in line. The second is apply preventive actions to avoid the negative risks. And the third, which is green in color, is very clearly the apply defect repairs to fix flaws and the problems identified through the quality control process. So these are the activities which would be kind of coincide with each other, and we need to ensure that depending on the different situation and the conditions of the project, we should pay attention to these three items. This covers up the process which is called as the direct and manage project work. And let me take you back on the output once again. The output what this process deliver is that various deliverables, that means various actions for the team based on the inputs what had been fed into it, a work performance data, change request, and a project management plan updates. Remember, when the word which comes in as a project management plan updates, what you need to think in your mind is that all the subsidiary plans, there would be a small update because of the changes done in the cycle, changes done in this process. So project management plan update means all the plans what we are going to update back. And this would also result into a project document update. So that means we'll be updating all our documentation by the changes what are part of the direct and managed project work. So this is what was covered in this process area. Now we are into the next stage of the knowledge area, which is project integration management, and the process what we are into is a process called monitor and control project work. A monitor and a project control work is very clearly now we are into the next stage of our process group, and the process group what we are into is called as a monitoring and control. From the process group perspectives, we are into the fourth process group, which is monitoring and control. From the knowledge management area perspective, we are into a task called monitor and control process work. So that's a process which we are into. Now let us look at the inputs to this process. The input to this process is a project management plan, which is coming in from the second process of this knowledge area itself. Schedule forecast. Schedule forecast comes in from project time management. Cost forecast, which is coming in from project cost management. Validated changes coming in from the previous process. Work performance information. And the last two, which you are already familiar with, is enterprise environmental factors and organization process asset. Organization process asset. So EEF and OPA is the input to this process. Once we go to the tools and techniques, you look at they are more or less the same what were there for the previous process, which is expert judgment, project management information systems, meetings, a change request. Output is a change request, work performance reports, project management plan update, project document update. So these are going to be the outputs of the monitor and control project work. Let me share with you on maybe the broader understanding on what should be the activity we should be covering up as a part of the monitor and control project work. Before that, I would like to cover up on, So monitoring and control project is basically a process of tracking, reviewing, regulating the progress which is needed to meet the performance objectives. This process is majorly concerned with the actual performance against the planned performance, because the word monitoring and control is already into the play. Assessing performance to determine whether any corrective or preventive actions are indicated. Maintained and accurate timely information base concerning the project's products and its associated documentation. Provide information to support status reporting. Provide forecast to update on the current cost and current schedule information. Monitoring implementation of the approved changes as they occur. Let us look back on the various analytical techniques what we talked about. And those techniques are kind of a regression analysis, grouping analysis, causal analysis, root cause analysis, forecasting methods, failure mode and effect analysis, fault tree analysis, reserve analysis, trend analysis, earned value management, and variance analysis. So what you need to understand from this module perspective is that we would be making use of various analytical techniques to look at whether we are in time, in schedule, in budget when it comes to the project work. And these techniques would be discussed at length when we are talking about the project time management and project cost management. So that's the place wherein we should be discussing those activities pretty much at length in detail. Let me move ahead. And the process which I'm actually going to talk about is a process called as perform integrated change control. So this is the fifth process of the knowledge area project integration management. And The inputs to this process is the project management plan, work performance reports, change requests, and after change request, what we have is the standard EEF, which is enterprise environmental factors, and then comes your OPA, which is organizational process asset. So you should be very clear on the last two. And what I need to now tell you over and above the names of the respective processes, that the monitoring and control area for this particular knowledge group has two processes in it. The one which we talked on is monitor and control project work, which we just finished. And the second which we are into, which is perform integrated change control. So this is the second area in the monitoring and controlling. Yes. Fifth area from the project integration management perspective. Okay. So let us look at the perform integrated change control. The tools and techniques, they remain expert judgment and meeting, which is the item which we have used in the previous process. The change control tool is something which is coming up as the new item in the tools and technique. The output what this process yields into is an approved change request, because it is the process of the change control. So of course it would lead into the change request and approved change request, various change logs because you are making the changes, and the another two outputs remains the same as our previous process, which is project management plan update and the project document updates. So what is the process of change management? I have shared with you on this process maybe in various discussions. Let me bring it back again to you with the words which I have used during the discussion called a CCB, which is a change control board. Let me start with the first activity in this process. So change management is a process which is a process of raising the change request. And why those changes are created is that once you start reviewing the progress, once you start reviewing and tracking the progress of each of the process areas, you realize that the output which is getting produced, this output may or may not be in the line of the expectations or with respect to the baselines what we have agreed. And that forces you to initiate a change request so that the remaining portion of the work we can execute and implement in a way that I meet my project objectives, I meet my final baselines, and that is where there is a need for us to put those change requests. So once we raise a change request, the change register gets updated. We also look at the impact what this change is going to bring in onto the various other processes. And we also involve the subject matter experts to look at whether those kind of changes which we are going to bring in, whether they would be leading into the any such impact onto the other processes. And before we go to the change control board, it is expected that the project management team and the project manager, they have done the impact analysis, and you have considered what are the positive and negative impact of a particular change which you are going to bring in. So remember one thing, before you go to the change control board, it is expected that you guys have considered all the possible options to look at why the changes is needed, And why cannot you manage with the change? So you have considered all the pros and cons very clearly before you put back those changes back to the management and that to the change control board. Change control board has the right either to approve or to reject a plan. So remember, sending a change request to a change control board does not always mean that you are going to get an approval out of your change request. There can be some shortcoming in the impact analysis which we have done, and the change control board realize and maybe they have a perception basis the analysis what we have done. They feel like that no, this change is not really needed and the team can still manage to deliver without this change. So the final decision of the approval or a dismissal or the rejection lies with the change control board very clearly. And in case the change control board approves a particular change, in that scenario, you'll have to do the planning all over again because that change would have an impact on all the subsidiary plans, all the different processes. And just think for a while that you had initiated a change request to the time. Maybe you realize that for some unforeseen reasons, the project is currently running late by 2 months. You had raised that concern to the change control board with all the justifications, with all the impact, and you realize that by putting up the extra efforts, by expediting various activities, the best you can do is that you can only mitigate about 1 month out of that 2 months lag what you have, even if you put in the additional manpower. So that means if the change control board has actually approved another 1 month extension to your project, then this 1 month activity would have an impact on each of the planning portions of your processes. And very clearly, you might have to replan those activities and bring back all those activities back into the sync to ensure you are matching up to meet those timelines. And why that is needed is that because we have very clearly understood that once the project is getting started, lot of those processes, they would interact with each other in various stages. So at a lot of places you would have seen that the output from a various process is being fed as an input to some process. So if we are not in sync, then we would not be meeting up the time targets. And this is what I meant by the replanning of all the activities in each of the individual processes. Yeah. So when we are into a perform integrated change control, once we are into the perform integrated change control, we are into the monitoring and control process group area. We are into a knowledge and group. From the knowledge groups, we are into a project integration management, and we are on the 5th process from the project integration management perspective. All right, Jasudas, you are clear? So we heard about configuration management. So once we are doing a change, we'll have to also look at the various mechanism, various opportunity that this change would not impact the other activities, and if it is impacted, we have to replan those various activities. So configuration arrangement activities are basically identifying what are the items we'll have to reconfigure. Any status accounting, that means pertaining to various the configuration status, anything which we'll have to redo, and we need to also look at the verification and audits. This is pretty much needed from the most of the industry's perspective when you talk about the configuration management. If a testing done in a construction line results that the output what is actually getting delivered is something not strong enough, so the configuration of various ingredients will have to be reworked. That if the initial configuration was actually telling you that you will have to use maybe 4 portions of the cement to be mixed with the other ingredients, and the quality aspect comes out and very clearly says that, hey, this is not strong enough, you might have to reconfigure and see whether you need to use the 6 portions of the cement from that. This is maybe from a construction perspective again. Let us look at managing the integrated change control. So project managers, they need to protect the project scope from being changed. Remember scope baseline. So one should try the best to ensure that the scope remains the same, because the scope is one thing that if the project scope is getting changed, it would have a major impact on each of the sub processes which are there as a part of this project. And with the change in the scope, I'm afraid this would directly lead to the more cost and maybe to more time. And this is what we mentioned on a triple constraint. So if you disturb one, the other will get disturbed pretty fast. And this you need to correlate back with a chapter which is called your project stakeholder management. And this is where I emphasized that once we identify the stakeholders, it is in the project manager's interest to identify all the stakeholders in the beginning of a project. And if you have identified the majority of the stakeholders before you have frozen on the scope, that would be the best thing for a project manager to deliver. Because once you have finalized the scope, and then if a stakeholder is asking for a change of the scope, then it is going to be a very tough task for you to bring in a change in any of the triple constraints. So the early you identify your stakeholders, better it is for you. And it would be easy from a stakeholder management perspective and to keep them satisfied if we know of the changes, the suggestion, the concerns well in advance. So as a part of the integrated change control, a project manager must provide for identifying a change which is proposed or which has already occurred, influencing the stakeholders so that the approved changes are incorporated into the project work. Remember, if the stakeholders are not satisfied, you will not get the satisfaction and maybe a kind of the mindset from those people into the project. The project manager must provide for reviewing various contents, reviewing change request, and you should maintain and manage the changes by the change request. Any change done here should reflect back a change in the baseline, which is your the triple baseline along with the quality, which is time, scope, cost, and quality. Considering the impact in a change request on the rest of the project, as well as considering all the knowledge areas which it is going to impact, we might have to redocument everything and look at from the perspective of the continuity on the defect repair validation and the quality control. So this is what which covers up the managing integrated change control. With this, we are through on the fifth process of the project integration management. Now comes the sixth process of the project integration management, which is close project or close phase. And remember, this is a process of the fifth process group, which is the closing stage. So we have covered initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling. And now we are into the closing phase. And also remember that this is the only knowledge area which has a presence across all the 5 process groups. Yes. Now let us look at the inputs to the close project or close phase process. First input is a project management plan. Second input is a accepted deliverables. You remember deliverables was an output to one of the previous process, which is becoming as an accepted deliverables as an input to this. Third is an organizational process asset, which you already know. So the techniques what we are going to be using for the purpose of close project or close phases: expert judgment, meetings, and analytical techniques, which I mentioned this to you, saying we should be covering up those techniques in detail at length in the project time management and project cost management modules. And this process results into the final product, the final service, or it could be a result or a transition. Remember, this knowledge area is the one from where the project starts, and this is also the knowledge area from where the project ends. So the beginning and end of a project is actually covered up by the project integration management, and at the same time the change management is also led by the project integration management. So when it comes for bringing up a change, this is the process. This is the knowledge group, which is project integration management. So what are the activities which we should pay attention to in closing the project or a phase? So this is a process of finalizing all activities across all of the project management groups to formally complete the project or phase. This is also a process wherein we review all the prior information so that before we end the phase, we are very clear that the job, the work which is there, that's fully complete, and the main objectives what we have set up in the beginning of the projects, they are achieved. We need to also look at the project management plan to ensure that each of the even subsidiary plan is paid attention to, and we have delivered the output for each of those processes. This process also ensures that a procedure to investigate and document the reasons for action taken is taken before a project is terminated. And very clearly remember that we document the lesson learned. We record the major we collect all the documents pertaining to the project for the records perspective and from the lesson learned perspective, and this can be used for any similar project going forward, like we might have used it for the project which we are executing. And this becomes the part of the organization process asset. Finally, once you update back the lesson learned, then the input which you have fed in, which is the OPA, organization process asset, that input becomes an output in the form of organization process asset update. There is an update word which gets added onto it, And that would very clearly mean that we have updated all the records, we have updated all the lesson learns, and that input gets translated into an output now. So easy for you to remember from a closing perspective, because this is the stage wherein we pay a good attention to the lesson learns and stuff. Yeah. Now, another item what you should look at is that the purpose of the closure of the activity is to actually get the formal acceptance on the project deliverables. That means if I was supposed to hand over a product to a customer, so that's the stage wherein the product gets handed over, and acceptance from the customer is actually taken into the account. And this would also mean that once the customer accepts the project, it is assumed that whatever scope we have agreed, whatever schedules we have agreed, we are well into that schedule, scope, and time. And customer is accepting that which is in line with what has been agreed, which is in sync with what has been agreed. Contract closure is also part of this process. And once I'm using a word called contract closure, I'm actually talking about a close contract kind of word, which is a part of the procurement process basically. So project manager approves all the deliverables, supplies, and the contract with the customer also comes to an end. And it is assumed that the customer agrees that he has received all the product and the output what was meant for. So this brings us to the end of the sixth process of the project integration management. And once we reach to this stage, there is another important activity what project managers should do. That's a stage to release the resources as well. These resources which you have booked for, which you have used for the project as such, and I'm actually specific to the human resources especially here. So that's a time wherein you release the resources, which is also linked with the closing the project or the phase. So with this, we come to an end of the closing the project